Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in the Web Security Academy series. In today's video, we'll be covering lab number 2 in the SSRF module titled Basic SSRF against another backend system. Alright, before we continue with the video, I'd like to announce that this video is part of a course that I offer on my academy. Now you might be wondering, why would I buy a course that is made available for free on YouTube? Well, there are 4 reasons why you might want to do that. Number 1 is that you gain early access to recorded material. As soon as I record new videos, I make them available through my course right away. Whereas on YouTube, they'll only be released on a weekly schedule. Reason number 2 is that you gain access to a Discord channel where you can ask questions. The Discord channel is divided into topics that we cover in the course, and if you run into any issues, you get to ask questions about anything related to the course material. Reason number 3 is that you no longer have to deal with YouTube ads or sponsor messages. And last but not least, reason number 4 is you get to support me. Any revenue generated from this course will go back into maintaining the academy and creating more videos and courses that will be made available for free on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in buying the course, make sure to check out the link in the description. And that is it. Let's go back to our video. If you do not have an account on the Web Security Academy, you can get one by visiting the URL portswigger.net/websecurity and clicking on the sign up button. I already have an account and I am logged in, so to access the exercise, I'm going to click on Academy. Go down, select the learning path. Go down, select SSRF. And then go down one more time and select the lab Basic SSRF against another backend system. Alright, let's get started. This lab has a stock check feature which fetches data from an internal system. To solve the lab, use the stock check functionality to scan the internal 192.168.0 range for an admin interface on port 8080, then use it to delete the user Carlos. Alright, so the vulnerable feature over here is the stock check functionality. And the goal of the exercise is to use the stock check functionality in order to scan the internal IP range for an admin interface on port 8080 and then delete the user Carlos. Alright, let's save that and add an analysis section. Next, let's access the lab. This might take some time, so in the meantime, I'm going to open up Burp Suite Professional in order to complete the exercise. So you don't need Burp Suite Professional to complete the exercise. However, since we are going to run an automated attack using Intruder, it's just going to be much faster for me to do it using Burp Suite Professional versus using the Community Edition. We will script the exploit, which will take just a couple of seconds, just like Burp Suite Professional. So stick around to the second part of the video if you want to see how to script this in Python. So hit Next, Start Burp, and we'll wait for Burp to load up. Okay, let's move it over here and click on the Proxy tab. Next, we're going to go to View Details. And here's the check stock functionality that is vulnerable. We're going to set Foxy Proxy to send requests to Burp and click on Check Stock. Alright, our request was intercepted in Burp. We're going to send it to Repeater and analyze the request. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Alright, so it's the same stock check functionality that we saw in the previous lab. If you do Control-Shift-U to URL decode it, you'll see that it's calling the domain 192.168.0.1 on port 8080. So what we're going to do is see if we could access the main page of this interface, hit Send, and we get a missing parameter. So what we're going to do is check if there's any other applications that are running on this IP range over here. So to do that, we could start with, 192.168.0.2, hit Send, and it says could not connect to external stock check service. So we'll try with 3, hit Send, still doesn't work, we'll try with 4, Hit send, still doesn't work, and you could see over here that, this might take a while in order to enumerate all 255 IP addresses. So what we're going to do is send this to intruder, go to intruder over here, click on positions, clear all positions over here, and then add the parameter over here that we'll use in order to conduct our attack. So click on add, and we'll replace it back to 1, and then we're going to go to payloads, click on numbers, and we want it to be sequential from 1 to 255 because that's the IP address range that we want to look at. And we're going to step one at a time. So what this is going to do is going to start off at 1 and then move on to 2 and then 3, 4, 5, 6 until 255. All right, this looks good. Let's go back to positions, make sure everything looks good, and it does. And I'm going to click on start attack and see what happens. All right, so at IP address 192.168.0.1, I get a 400 status code, whereas all the others are giving me 500. So I'm looking for something other than 500. That might mean that an application is running on that IP address. So they all look like they're 500 so far, which is not good. So what we're going to do is we're going to order by status. And here we go. We have a 404 on the IP address 192.168.0.190. And let's look at the response. It says not found. What that means is that this server is running. It's just that this page, which is just the general parent page, does not exist. So we're going to send this to repeater and play around with it to see if we could get a page that does exist on the server. So if we hit send again, you should see the 404 error. And let's see if an admin page exists over here. Hit send. And here we go. We get a 200 response. If we click on render, you could see that there's an admin panel that is available. And you have the ability to delete users. Perfect. So let's copy this and make note of it. So we've got application running on this server over here, and we have the ability to delete the Carlos user. So we're going to go to raw Carlos and see the URL that is used to delete the Carlos user. Let's copy it and add it over here. Delete Carlos. Perfect. So we're going to use our SSRF vulnerability in order to delete the Carlos user. So let's paste it over here and hit send. Good. We get a 302 redirection. We follow redirection and it should have deleted the user. So what I'm going to do next is let's click on cancel and check the admin interface to see if the Carlos user still exists in the interface. So if you do a search on Carlos, it's 0 matches. If you render, you see over here that there's no longer a Carlos user that you can delete, and you get the message user deleted successfully, which means that we successfully completed the exercise. And if you go back to the lab itself, you should see a congratulations, you solved the lab. All right, so we successfully completed the exercise by using burp in order to automate our attack. In case you don't have the professional version or your community edition is really slow and you want to enumerate not just the IP address but also the ports, you could script this in Python. It only takes a couple of seconds in order to run the exploit. So we're going to do just that. First, we'll save it and then we'll start our Python exploit. So the first thing we're going to do is import requests. Next, we're going to import the sys library and URL lib3. We're also going to disable request warnings, .disable warnings, and it's URL lib3 .exceptions .insecure request warning. And that is not the one that I want. So it should be insecure request warning. Okay, that looks good. Next, I'm going to set my proxies variable so that I can send all my requests to burp. And the reason I do that is because if my script is not working, I want to see the request in burp in order to debug why the script is not working. So it's http 127.0.0.1. 8080 and HTTPS. And that's the same one as before, 127.0.0.1, 8080. So that's the IP address and the port that burp is running on. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is define the main method. So let's say main and call it, and let's write it up over here. So def main, and we're gonna say if the length of the parameters that you give to the script over here is not equal to 2, so not equal to 2, then print a message saying the usage instructions is the name of the script, and then it takes in a parameter called URL. And then I'm also going to output an example. So example www.example.com. All right. And again, it takes in the name of the script. So this is .argv 0. All right, so what I'm trying to do over here is to tell the user that the way you run the script is by doing Python 3, name of the script, let's say script.py, and then the URL of the application. And if you don't give me those parameters, then I'm going to output the usage instructions and an example of how to run the script. Now, assuming you do give me 2 parameters, then I'm going to save the URL in a parameter called URL or in a variable called URL. So that would be argv1. And I'm also going to print a message saying that I'm trying to find the admin hostname or IP address in this case. And then we're going to say admin hostname is equal to this function over here, check admin hostname URL. And then once I find the admin hostname by running an automated attack that checks the entire IP address space, then I'm going to try to delete the Carlos user. So before we implement that, so let's say not complete. Let's implement this function over here, which is check admin hostname. Let's save this and create the function check admin hostname, and it takes in the URL. First, I'm going to create a variable called check stock path. That's the path to the page that has a vulnerable CSRF parameter. And the way we get that is by going back to burp and looking at the path in the request. So it's product/stock. Let's copy that and put it in here. And then I'm going to say admin hostname is equal to an empty string. And then I'm going to create a for loop for I in the range 1 to 256. So what I want to do over here is I want to enumerate this range. So what the for loop is going to do is it's going to start off at 1, and then it'll try 2, and then it'll try 3, and then it'll try 4, all the way to 256 minus 1, which is 255, to check if any of those IP addresses resolve to a 200 response code. So let's go back. So let's create a variable called hostname and set it to the URL that we want to check for, which in this case is this one over here. Let's copy that, put it in here, and we want to enumerate this parameter. So we're going to say %s, and we're going to add I over here. So what that'll do is it'll check every number in this range and put it in here. Now hostname is not the best variable name, but we'll go with it. And then we've got params. So that's the parameters of the request. And in this case, there's only one parameter called stock API. So we'll add that over here. And the value of the parameter is the hostname variable over here, just like we put it in here. So what it's going to do is it's going to check for 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and so on until it gets a 200 response code. So to do that, we're going to call the request. So request.post, we're using a post method because it is a post request. And then we're going to say the URL that you want to call is URL, which is the parameter that you give the script as a command line argument. And we're going to add the check stock path. Next, we're going to say data is equal to params. Verify is equal to false because I don't want to verify TLS certificates, and proxies is equal to proxies because I want the request to be sent through burp first before it's sent to the application in case I need to debug it. All right, and then I'm going to say if the status code of the response is equal to 200 so that it's successful, that means that the admin host name is equal to 192.168.0. whatever host name we're at right now, which in this case is I. And then we're going to break. And this is a really bad naming convention, so I'm just going to say admin IP address instead of host name. That sounds a bit better. All right, so if it gets a 200 response code, that means it reached an IP address that does exist on the internal network, and so it's going to save it in the variable admin IP address. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is say if admin IP address is equal to an empty string, then we're going to output the message. Could not find admin hostname. So our script failed. Otherwise, we're going to return the admin hostname. So if it was successful and it found an admin hostname, or again, in this case, it's an admin IP address. So if it was successful and it found an admin IP address, then it's going to return it. So if we go back to this over here, the admin IP address is going to be saved in here. So let's call this admin IP address. And now we found the IP address that is running the admin interface. The next thing we need to do is delete the Carlos user. So we're going to print a success message saying found the admin IP address and print the IP address of the admin interface. So that would be admin IP address. And then the next thing we're going to do is print deleting Carlos user, because that's the next step that we need to perform, which is delete the Carlos user. And in order to do that, we're going to create a function called delete Carlos or delete user. And it takes in the URL of the application and the admin IP address. All right, so this is completed. The last thing we need to do is create this function over here. All right, so let's create the function. So delete user takes in the URL and the admin IP address. And we're going to say delete user URL SSRF payload is equal to the SSRF payload that is used to delete a user. So we're going to take that from over here Let's copy that. Put it in here. And change this to the IP address that we found in the previous function. So we'll say %s, and then we'll say %admin IP address. And let's close this so that this becomes a little bit easier to write in. Here we go. All right, perfect. The next thing we're going to do is add another parameter called check stock path, which is the path to the page that is vulnerable, and that's product/stock. And then we're going to add a params variable with the stock API parameter. And in this case, it's going to take the delete user URL SSRF payload. So what this is going to do, it's going to call this page over here. So /product/stock, and we forgot a slash right over here. So /product/stock, and then it's going to run the SSRF payload that is used to delete the Carlos user in this parameter over here. All right, the last thing we're going to do is run the request. And we forgot an A over here. So it's requests dot post URL plus check stock path, and then data is equal to params, verify is equal to false, because we don't want to verify TLS certificates, and proxies is equal to proxies because we want the request to be intercepted in burp. And we said that it's a post request again because this is a post request that is being performed in the application. All right, so this deletes the user. The next thing we need to do is confirm that the user was actually deleted. So let's add a comment saying check if user was deleted. And we'll do this in the same fashion that we did this one over here. So we're going to say check admin URL SSRF payload. So the SSRF payload for checking the admin interface. And we're just going to copy this over here. Paste it in here. So the URL is this one over here. Let's copy this. Put it in here. And then change this entire thing over here to the IP address that we found. So admin IP address. And then we're going to create a params2 variable that takes in again the stock API parameter. And in this case, the payload is going to be the check admin URL SSRF payload. And then we're going to perform the request. So R is equal to request.post URL plus check stock path data is equal to params2 verify is equal to false, and proxies, let's change that, false, and proxies is equal to proxies because I want the request to be sent to burp in case I need to debug it. And then once that request is performed, what it's going to do is it's going to run this exact request over here. And then what I want to do is check if the string user deleted successfully is in the response. If it is, that means I successfully completed the exercise. If it's not, that means that the exploit has failed. So if the string user deleted successfully is in the response text, then print successfully deleted Carlos user. Otherwise, print exploit was unsuccessful. And let's save that. Alright, this looks good. So what's happening over here is if we go back, it takes in two parameters, the name of the script and the URL. It uses the URL in order to run an automated attack to see which IP address or host name is hosting the admin interface. Once it finds it, it takes in that IP address in order to delete the Carlos user. And if the attack was successful, it prints a message, successfully deleted Carlos user. If it wasn't successful, it'll print the message exploit was not successful. So let's save that, go to terminal, new terminal, and see if we get any errors for this script. So Python 3 and then SSRF lab02.py, and it takes in the URL of the application. So the application probably timed out. It did. So we're going to have to close it and open up a new instance of the lab. All right, it loaded up. Let's copy it and paste it in here and remove the last slash because we already include it in our paths over here. So you've got /product. So let's hit enter. So far no errors. That's a great sign. It's saying it's finding the admin host name, and if we look at Burp Suite Professional and click on proxy, go to HTTP history, you'll see that it's performing requests. And it's getting 500 response messages, and so it knows that it hasn't found the IP address for. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to wait until it gets a 200 response message. And if it doesn't, that means our exploit was unsuccessful. And let's see which one it's reached at. So it's so far at .65. And you'll notice over here, this is so much faster than using the community edition of Burp. So if you don't have the professional edition, I would recommend you just script the exploit, and within a matter of seconds, you'll get the IP address that you're looking for. Okay, so we could see over here, it reached the 200, and then it ran the second function, which is deleting the Carlos user. And we should see that right over here. So this deletes the Carlos user. It got a 302 redirect, which means our exploit worked. And if we look over here, it says finding the admin host name. It found it at 192.168.0.222. And then it tried to delete the Carlos user, and it did find the message user deleted successfully in the admin page, and so it reported that the Carlos user was successfully deleted. And if we go back to the exercise, you could see over here that it says congratulations, you solved the lab. Alright, so we successfully completed the exercise by first automating the attack using Burp Suite and then automating it using Python. In the next lab, we'll look at certain defenses that are being applied in order to mitigate SSRF vulnerabilities and how to bypass them. If you liked the video, hit the subscribe and share button so that the video reaches a wider audience. Also, make sure to check out my course if you're interested in seeing more videos like this one. Thank you, and see you in the next video.